Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome back to Mr. G's classroom. We've got a full slate again. Hopefully, things are going well as we continue with the online learning. So let's just go ahead and get started. I had to wear Buckeye gear today, and I did stick with the basketball jersey theme. Although I am primarily wearing the Buckeyes gear because of the successful results of the NFL draft for Ohio State. Anyway, without further ado, here's the agenda for this morning. We've got attendance and prayer as always, but Joe Hanby emailed me with a phenomenal question, so I'm going to go ahead and teach that to everybody about, the sign of A versus sign of B, and if you get the same answer, and what happens whenever you just change the angle with that. So it's a good question. So thank you, Joe, for emailing me that. Then I'm just gonna tell you about getting tricky with it. We're gonna do a different video session or a different video portion of that of what we're learning today in class. And then we're going to do the back of the half sheet. It's the back, like again, whenever I printed it, this was supposed to be on the front of your notes, of just your cheat sheet, and then the back was supposed to look like that. Okay, so we are going to go over these two problems today. All right, which I have on my board over there. So we're going to do the notes, a couple examples, the Desmos activity. You only need to do two problems for that. All right, just a way for me to check to make sure that you know what you're doing. So two problems. You've already done 1 through 7, but it's going to start over because I gave you a different class code. So you only need to do 2 out of those 14, I think, is how many there are. So number 8 and 9. And then the homework is going to be the using trig lengths to find, or using trig to find lengths. And I'm going to give you a multiple choice homework assignment that's going to be labeled as a quiz, but it's not. It's just a way for you to check your answers, okay? So there is a homework submitting on Google Forms for this one, okay? And I give you the numbers right here, but we'll come back to this. All right, so that is the agenda for today. So let's go ahead and start with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, as always, enter into our homes, enter into this class, enter into the hearts of everybody watching this video right now, and please help us all continue to grow closer to you and realize how blessed we truly are each and every day. So help us continue to value the friendships, our families, and just human connectivity and relationships. And also thank you for technology so that we can continue learning through the internet and through videos and our Chromebooks and stuff like that. So thank you for having the advancements in technology to still accomplish a lot, to grow intellectually as human beings. So thank you for all that, and help us continue to think about all the blessings that we have today and each and every day, even amongst this quarantine and social distancing thing that we are all living through. Continue to pray for all the prayer intentions on the Google Forms for attendance, and just continue to give praise and honor and glory to you through the intercession of your Mother Mary by praying, "Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence I fly unto thee. O Virgin of Virgin, my Mother, to thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of thy Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me." Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. All right. Let's go back. So Joe's question from my 4A, I believe. Here was the question. He's like, "Hey, Mr. G, is sine of A and sine of B the same thing?" And it's actually not. So that's a great question. All right, so let's set them both up. So I have a right triangle, and we're going to use this as kind of like a review from last class. So if you don't know what we're going to be doing right here, you need to go back and watch the previous video from last class. Because again, otherwise, this lesson's already impossible for you. So if you need a refresher, you already know that, if you do or not. So sine of A. If I'm doing sine of A, we got to first put a mark at our angle. There's sine of A. All right, so I'm going to label my triangle, just like before. My hypotenuse is the longest side, as always. Opposite of A is right there. Adjacent, of course, is right there then. So remember, SOHCAHTOA. So since we're doing sine, now I could have chose cosine or tangent. It doesn't matter. But remember, our best friend of SOHCAHTOA. All right, so SOHCAHTOA, we're doing sine. So that means we are doing opposite over hypotenuse. So if we're doing sine of A would equal opposite over hypotenuse. So it would be 8 over 10, which reduces to 4/5. Okay, so that's the sine of A. All right, opposite over hypotenuse. This is all review. So I'm going to underline that in blue, because that's what we just did. And now let's change it to red. So we've got sine of A accomplished. And now let's do sine of B. So I'm going to do sine of B in red this time. Now, since we're doing sine of B, I got to focus on my angle located at B. So this is the angle we're talking about right now in red. So what changes whenever I'm labeling O, A, and H? Should be the O and the A. Right? The hypotenuse is still the same. My hypotenuse never changes. It's always the longest side. Right? But now, here's angle B, so that means that this is no longer adjacent because this is my angle. So I'll go opposite right here. So this is opposite, and now this is adjacent. Okay? So if you change the angle that we're talking about, your O and your A switch. Okay? So let's do sine of B. If we do sine of B, that's going to equal, so we're doing the red, right? So sine of B, opposite over hypotenuse, it's going to be 6 over 10. And 6 over 10 reduces to 3/5. Okay, so sine of A, sine of B, they are not the same thing because your angle changes the relationship between your opposite side and your adjacent side. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Great question, Joe, and I think that benefited everybody. So, without further ado, we are going to move on to step 4. Now, if you need to, go back on your notes, on the email. If you want to re-watch Getting Triggy with it, because I'm just using that video to teach pretty much all of trigonometry, the portion of the Getting Triggy with it video, it's only 32 seconds that deals with what we're actually learning today. So technically, you're only going to be learning 32 seconds worth of new material, according to the video, but it'll take longer, of course. But the segment that you want to pay attention to in the video of Getting Triggy with it is from the 2-minute mark to the 2-minute and 32-second mark. Okay, so 32 seconds. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead to the board and we're going to do these 2 problems. Okay, make sure you grab a graph or a calculator with sine, cosine, and tangent on it. All right, so welcome. Here is what we are working on today. This is that quote-unquote half sheet. Here's my calculator. We're using sine, cosine, tangent today. I'm going to teach you how to use those buttons. All right, so if you watch the video, which is highly recommended, I would have if we were together physically, we would watch that part of the video. All right, so I've got solving for a side. Notice I put SOHCAHTOA on both sides because that is your best friend. All right, so part of that video, because the goal here is we are solving for a side. All right, so here I've got x is there. That's what we're solving for. We're solving for x. Okay, so x is there. I have 13. I do not have the hypotenuse. Now, if I did give you the hypotenuse, you don't have to use trig. You can just use the Pythagorean theorem. But that's why trigonometry is important, because you can solve for missing side lengths without using Pythagorean theorem. Because Pythagorean theorem, you need two sides. Trigonometry, you only need one. But both cases, you need to have a right triangle. So, without further ado, on the video, it says in there from the gym teacher, I believe that's Mr. Murphy. It says if x is up high, you know you got to multiply. All right, so what does that mean? All right, so first of all, I need to locate my angle. My angle is 32 degrees. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and locate my angle. Next step, you got to label your triangle, which is our review. All right, so if this is my angle, that's my right angle. So this is my hypotenuse. So I'm just labeling it. Hypotenuse, 32 degrees is the focus angle. So that's opposite. That's your adjacent. All right. So which side is quote unquote useless? All right. That's the question you want to ask yourself. X is what I'm solving, so I have to use opposite. 13 is useful. That's my adjacent side. All right. The H is useless. All right. So I have O and A. So that will tell you which one of these I'm using. And it's going to be TOA. All right. Because that's the only one that has O and A for opposite over adjacent. So here's your setup. All right. It's going to be tangent of your angle, which is 32, equals opposite over adjacent, O over A. So it's x over 13. And that's your setup. This is always your angle, guys. Trigonometry always has to have an angle attached to it. These are like inseparable. You cannot detach these. All right. So now I got to solve for it. So tangent of 32 equals x over 13. How do you solve for that? By reading this. If x is up high, which it is, you know you got to multiply. All right. So you're going to go ahead and multiply these two across from each other. So you're going to have in your calculator x equals 13 times tangent, and it should give you a parenthesis, 32 close parenthesis. And that's all I got to do is type that in. Now I will make sure, guys, if you're using this calculator, a calculator like this, you need to make sure you go to, where are we going to? You just got to make sure it's in degree mode. All right, so if you click on the degree button, so I clicked on this button right there, degree, you got to make sure it's in degree mode and not radian or gradient. All right, we don't care about those two. You'll learn about radians later on in your math careers, but you got to make sure it's in degree mode. All right, so just click that degree button, make sure that one's underlined, click enter, and then you should be good. It should say degree real small right there, as you can see. All right, so then just type this in. All right, so 13 times tangent of 32. That's what I have in my calculator. 13 times tangent of 32, because that's my angle. Click enter. Boom, 8.12. So 8 and 12 1/100th. Just round to the nearest hundredth, I guess. So I'm going to say x equals 8.12. There's no unit, so I'm just going to box that up. And that, guys, is how you solve trig. That is how long this side is right there. 8.12. Okay? Let's do one more like that. whenever x is up high. Then we'll move on to the other piece. So another example. So we've got 25 degrees. All right, so that is our reference angle. Just like before, I'm labeling opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So my hypotenuse is right there where the 22 is. My opposite is right there where the x is. My adjacent is right here where nothing is. So since there's nothing on the adjacent side, I don't care about the adjacent side. So this time, I'm using O and H. So which one uses O and H? Sine. So I'm using so. So my setup is sine of 25 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. So it's x over 22. Okay? So you just got to multiply. Because remember, if x is up high, you know you got to multiply from the video. So x equals 22 times, sorry, I said tangent because I was looking at the previous example. 22 times sine of 25. So let's type that into our calculator. 22 times sine of 25. Close it up. You'll get 9.297. So we're just going to go ahead and round that to 9.30. 9 3/10. All right, because the 9 will round up. So it's going to be x equals 9.30. If you just put 9.3, that's fine. But either way, 9.3 is how long that x is right over there. Okay, so we just did 2 examples with x up high. All right, so you got to make sure you're labeling your O, A, and H correctly. Otherwise, you don't know if you're using sine, cosine, or tangent. That's why this is so helpful. Like I said, SOHCAHTOA is your best friend. Now let's move on. Hopefully that went well for you. Let's move on to if x is at the bottom. All right. So I would write these down on your half sheet if you printed that off. Right, I would have written this down already, and you should have written this down already. If not, just grab some scratch paper, I guess, if you don't have a printer, but you should. Those are your notes. So let's set it up first, and then we'll worry about this. Okay, so this time I'm focusing on, the beginning process is the exact same. There's my reference angle of 37 degrees. That means this is opposite, this is my hypotenuse, this is my adjacent. All right, which one is useless? The opposite, because there's nothing on there. All right, I have to use 11 and x, because I'm solving for x, so I have to use x. All right, so let's set it up. It's the exact same thing. If it's A and H, which one do I use? Ka. So cosine. Okay, so it's going to be cosine of 37 degrees equals adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 11 over x. All right, now this time, if x is down low, you switch with the trig and divide. So you look at your x and you switch it with the trig, and it shows that in the video. So it's going to be x equals 11 over cosine of 37 degrees. And like I said, these two are like attached forever. All right, so you have to keep cosine and 37 together. So then just this operation with the fraction means division. So that's why you divide. Okay, so x is going to equal whatever 11 divided by cosine of 37 is. So 11 divided by cosine of 37. So that's what I typed in my calculator. Click enter. 13.77. And that's our final answer, guys. And your answers, if you get 13.77, so close to 14, right? Your answer should make sense, right? So if x is 13.77 and you put it with your triangle, that makes sense because x is the hypotenuse, so x should be bigger than 11. So you can kind of check your answer, right? So if you got let's say you got 5 for x, and you looked at your triangle, that doesn't make sense, right? Because it should be the hypotenuse, which is always the longest side. Okay, so you can always kind of check to make sure your answer makes sense with the problem. Our final example as a class. Here is my triangle, 51 degrees, 14x. So let's label it. 51 degrees is my angle, so this is my opposite. My hypotenuse is right there. And then my adjacent is the 14. Okay? So which one do I use? Looks like we are using cosine again. All right? I didn't do that on purpose, but here we are. So I don't need the opposite side. I need A and H. So I'm using cosine once again. So let's go ahead and you'll have cosine of 51 degrees equals 14 over x. And just like before, x is down low, so we're going to have to divide. So just do after we flip them. So it's going to be x equals 14 divided by cosine of 51 degrees. All right, so type that in your calculator. 14 divided by cosine of 51. And you get 22.25. And that's what you should have. X equals 22.25. And that is my hypotenuse. So that makes sense of why it's bigger than 14. Okay, so 22.25. Now I could have given you a different problem. Like if I flip-flop these and put 14 there and x there, then that means it would be x over 14 and you would just multiply like normal. So you have to make sure you follow along with the steps. Okay? But sine, cosine, tangent, you have to figure out which one it is. And then depending on if x is up high, you multiply. If x is down low, you switch with the trig and you divide. Okay, so that's the lesson for today. And hopefully that makes sense. If you need to, go back and re-watch it. Whatever you need to do. Those two bottom example problems you don't have anywhere, though. I just made those up. Okay, so don't worry about that if you don't know where those came from. So you have some things to do in class. In class, trig ratios, like I said, just do 2 of them on the Desmos. So 8 and 9 only. That's it. All right. And then, so that's classwork. Then your homework is the worksheet using trig to find lengths. All right. So let me see if I have that available here. Handy. I don't know if I do. Yeah. This paper. Using trigonometry to find lengths. Okay. So that is your worksheet that is in your email. Make sure you check your answers. The answers are already done for you. They're round to the nearest 10th. Right? It's just your job to make sure you know how to get those answers. If you don't get them right, email me before next class because we might have a quiz. You never know. Right? I think some of us learned that the hard way with the special right triangles quiz. If you have questions, ask me beforehand and not afterwards because after that, the quiz and the game time is too late. All right, so that worksheet that I just showed you, here's the homework problems. Using trig to find lengths. Numbers 1 through 4, 6, 9, 12, 14, 17, and 18. So 10 problems. Since you already have the answers on the same document, I'm not going to have you type the answers in there because I'm just trusting that you're doing it. But I am going to have you on the Google Forms. It's going to be labeled as a quiz and it's going to be graded, but it's just a completion grade. All right, it's multiple choice. You have to decide if you're going to be using sine, cosine, or tangent. Okay, so just use that as you go along. So 10 problems on your homework. Submit to Google Forms, right? And that's by tomorrow night, 10 o'clock. Otherwise, I think that's it, guys. Hopefully, trigonometry is starting off well for you. Like I said, trigonometry is probably one of the most important geometry topics, and it's one of my favorite to teach. So I'm sorry we can't do it together face to face. But that's the class for today. Hopefully you learned something. If you get confused, if you're having calculator issues or something, make sure you ask me and I can help you. Okay, because there's a lot of different types of calculators on there. All right, so please take that initiative on your own and ask me for help. Otherwise, hopefully you're continuing to do well. Keep up the good work, and God bless. Amen.